All right, welcome back once again.
Welcome back.
Today we are going to be talking about Revengers, not Tokyo Revengers,
Not the
Revengers. Brand spanking new. And we are going to be drinking some Amber Gaba Oolong, which I personally really enjoy. And you want to take it up?
Yeah, sweet. So the Saturday kicks off with our who I at the time assumed was our MC, lurking in the shadows. Looks like he's waiting to get the drop on his target. He's in all black assassin gear. So and I'm a simple creature. I see samurais, I see samurai swords, and I'm excited.
Sign me up.
Exactly. So he kind of makes himself seen. These three older looking gentlemen, middle aged, a little, maybe in their 40s or so. And one of them kind of looks like he recognizes him. He's like, "It's you," and then he just swiftly cuts him all down, single slash, very efficient. And then, as though one of them is taking his dying breath, pulls out a gold coin and just chomps it, man. And I'm like, if anybody who watches this doesn't cringe on that scene, you're a psychopath.
That's gotta hurt.
Oh no, dude. Yeah, absolutely. So, ouch. That one got to me a little bit. I was like, oof. And so now it looks like a small amount of time has passed. We see our samurai MC chilling under a bridge, all by his lonesome, and another gentleman, he kind of makes his way down to him, introduces himself. His name is Yusui Yin. Is that how you say his first name? Ewan? Yeah, Ewan. He wanders down to him and he introduces himself. I'm a merchant of all trades. And the locals have been they reached out to me and they kind of wanted me to see what you're doing over here. And then Kurima, our samurai who attacked those men, states that he's a samurai and I killed a man and he's very upfront about it. But he said he was ordered to do so and he didn't have the means to refuse. That's just kind of the way that dynamic is set up.
And Ewan was even like, "Oh, how honorable! Why are you hanging out under a bridge? You're obviously just
you should be able to return to your family." And they
praise you for it
about it. Yeah. But then Kurima responded with, "Well, someone that I knew and was pretty close to, somebody I knew well." And Ewan convinces him to soak him into this bridge isn't going to solve anything or get you anywhere. And Kurima kind of gets a little confidence about him. He's like, "You're right," and he decides to take his leave. And so I liked how it started. I thought the very opening scene was pretty cool.
It was exciting.
Yeah,
I was like, okay,
right into it. And then now we're getting back into some more early interesting developments because as Raizo, Kurima's first name is, he's making his way. Looks like he's making his way out of the village. He's kind of going up this mountaintop. 3 men on horseback approach him. And it looks like he recognizes who they are. He doesn't get into a fighting stance or anything, So, and these men kind of greet him as well. And but it turns out they're kind of there to basically Raizo is like the last loose end in this scheme. And so they pull out guns. Raizo kind of hears a voice. Tell him to if he wants to live, just jump into right. And so he does. He jumps right off the side of the mountain. I think one of the bullets grazes his shoulder, and then he dives right into the river. So then you kind of see it looks like that.
You see a glint of some string or something,
and so it seems like that young lady is kind of fishing him out of the river. And so now we're back at we see Ewan, and he's we can tell that Raizo's been doctored up a little bit, and then we see the girl who fished him out, and they're kind of just talking amongst themselves. And Kurima comes to, and he's talking to Ewan, and then Ewan's explaining to him like, things aren't as they seem. You've been duped into assassinating the man who you did. It looks like, how did you say his name? Matsumine?
Matsumine?
Yeah, Matsumine. He's kind of he's the mastermind behind it, all of this stuff basically. And so, so we kind of learned there that Matsumine is this character who, I was kind of confused on like what he is. So I guess there's like a daimyo, set up there where it's like, one of them was in charge, and then Kareem was like the, I don't know if like a bodyguard or like samurai who's just kind of oversees that.
Like resident.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that kind of seems like that was the setup there.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ewan kind of just basically explains you've been duped. Matsumine is the one responsible. If you want to do right by the man you innocently killed, then you should help us, in doing that. And then we also see that the bait and gold.
Yeah, he starts to kind of bring him into like, this is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has the resolve to leave teeth imprints into a piece of gold, we take upon ourselves to exact that revenge.
Mm-hmm. That's their vendetta.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so now Kurima, he agrees to do that since he knows the residents, he knows the layout, and he's kind of mapping all this out for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we also see a few other characters that aren't quite introduced or explained, but it's pretty easy to gather that they're all part of this group together. I think there's 4 of them. Now 5, including
Raizo.
Yeah, who's gonna tag along with them for this incident. And Ewan, so Raizo maps it all out for him. Then Ewan kind of says, you should stay back on this one. Your injuries aren't quite healed up all the way. Just we'll take it from here. Like, you've mapped this out for us. We have a pretty good understanding.
Yeah, you got us this far. Let us take care. Let us get the revenge for you.
Right. And so Matsumine and like some of his goons looks like they're kind of boasting about the plot they had just pretty gotten away with, pretty much. His lackeys are all, oh, you're so
you're so wonderful, master. Yeah.
And it looks like they're pouring up some sake and enjoying themselves. Now it kind of seems like Matsumine has gained, in doing so, which it was a pretty impressive scheme that he had thought of here. And so him in doing this, he's gained X amount of power, and he's going to have some control.
Mm-hmm.
They even kind of talk about like with the English they kind of mention like the English who have come. So I guess, which it seems like this is like Edo period.
Yeah, they plant that seed.
Mm-hmm.
They plant that seed, and it really grows, which is something I appreciate. So it was a seed planted that they definitely intended to grow upon.
Yeah, so we know like the English have been introduced, and they're going to play some role in this. But so interesting development as Raizo he goes and grabs his old gear, and it looks like he's waiting for Matsumine,
which I thought was funny because when he mapped it out, he was like, Ewan asked, is there an escape exit?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, he trusts his guard with his life. And he's like, oh, how? He must be really confident.
Yeah.
And that allowed Raizo to wait for him at his
Yeah, so exactly. So he went exactly there. Now, I don't know why this bugged me, but so whenever the other Revengers are kind of going and taking out some of the guards that are just kind of posted out on the outskirts of the building they're in.
The lackeys.
Yeah. Niu, I think the girl with
the kite girl.
Yeah, the kite girl. Yeah, and we see that here. So What did you think of? I don't know why this bugged me as much as it did. I don't know why, but it kind of got under my skin a little bit. Nothing huge, but so she walked into this room, or one of the guards walked into this room, which she had lined her kite's string, which you can kind of see like glistening, like it has something on it where they do like.
Yeah, it looks jagged.
Yeah,
to some extent.
Mm-hmm. And then you see the guard kind of gets tangled in this, and then her kite just soars into the sky. Without an ounce of wind, gust, or anything. I don't know how kites work,
Yeah.
But I thought it was kind of funny that it just flies with enough force to pick this guy up off the ground.
Yeah.
And I was just like, huh.
It was cheesy, yeah. Because certainly a kite about as big as her could lift a man that's easily 140 pounds, because he's wearing like and stuff. So.
But it was still kind of cool. I kind of like that. It's her what she does with skill set, I guess.
It's interesting, yeah.
So they kind of take care of all the guards, and then Matsumine is fleeing through this underground tunnel that Raizo had said there didn't exist. So he gets through to the end of it. It leads him into this foresty area, woodsy area. And right then and there, Matsumine locks eyes with Raizo. They exchange a few words, but Raizo just cuts him down. And so he cuts him down, and then he kind of starts having, talking to himself. So we find out that the man he had killed was his father-in-law, or soon to be, because he was going to marry this Yui, and that was his father-in-law who Yui had murdered. So
yeah, they said he was entwined in this opium den ring, and
yes, and
Matsumine was the one who tipped him off
about that, right? Yeah, and so I mean, Rai felt like it was his duty to cut him down for like this huge dishonor, disgrace in bringing those opium to
Japan.
Yeah, to Japan and distributing it.
Nagasaki in particular.
Yeah, so he's like, rushing to Yui, where and
he's like taking apart the sword. He's getting ready to disembowel himself.
Yeah, seppuku. Yeah, he's getting ready to perform a seppuku himself once he sees, or I guess once he gets to Yui to atone for
the egregious action.
Yeah, and man, he gets there and finds that she has killed herself, and that's kind of where the opening ends there. But what a bristling scene that was.
Yeah, coming off of Elfin Lied and into this, I was like, wow, this is pretty gory too. Definitely not to the same magnitude, but it really gets pretty brutal, and I wasn't expecting it. And no punches pulled first episode.
Absolutely not.
The music's sweet. They started off strong with nice music. It's very stylistically different. You get all sorts of interesting flares, and the fight scenes are really smooth too. So good first impression. The pacing's fast, and we'll get into this later, but I think almost to a fault at some points. But following that grisly spectacle, a flashback ensues of Raizo training with Yui and her father before returning to an understandable husk of a man from the previous episode. He is not handling what he saw well. Who would? But breaking to Ewan at a dilapidated and clearly shady church, we are introduced to Gerald, who's the preacher of this establishment.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention, I'm sorry to...
Oh, go ahead.
Another thing, I don't know, and I don't know why these got to me here, because I watch all kinds of anime. And obviously it's not super, no, but it seems it's super like realism. Like, I'm not necessarily someone who like looks for that.
Sure.
But just whenever Ewan, so I didn't really talk about his choice of assassination, I guess, if you will.
The gold paper.
Yeah, and how it constricts onto the face and the person suffocates. And then he pulls down his...
he shows the Mother Mary.
Yeah, which is like the most Edo period Japan. the most incredibly detailed tattoo I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It looks so good. I don't know if modern tattooers could make anything look like that in 2023. I just thought it was funny. Like
That was funny,
the most
yeah.
vibrant, colorful tattoo was nuts.
Yeah, he couldn't have done anything like that. And if it did, he would be a lot older. It would have taken most of his life to get that done, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But another interesting thing for the Black Lagoon people who are watching this church reminds me a lot of the like Shady Church in Black Lagoon. But Ewan, repenting for his sins, receives his payment for a job well done. And we can kind of put two and two together that they're kind of the central location for the Revengers. Mm-hmm. And promptly splitting the cut amongst the gang, he cuts Raizo in as well, to the dismay of everyone, particularly Shoji, the like alcoholic with the scar across his face. He was really upset. But quickly demanding they kill off Raizo for his dastardly deeds.
And they also mentioned like he like having an outsider partake is like against the code that they follow as well.
Yeah. So yeah, let's just kill him. It's definitely because of his actions and not because we want more money. Mm-hmm. But Tepa, who's the doctor of the group,
the 6'8"
massive man whose shirt explodes every time he uses his bow. He spends his days as a doctor and visits a particularly sick client of his. Already aware of her final days, she requests basically a hit. Mm-hmm. She produces a gold mon bearing teeth marks so bit in gold. And
it was pretty sad there. She like it was like it took everything that she
it was her all, but yeah,
to get that,
that was her livelihood, I think her inheritance. Mm-hmm. It was everything, all to exact her revenge, which was to kill her husband who put her in the situation that she's in. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm sure an opium addiction didn't help that. But returning to Raizo, we do a lot of bouncing around here. Mm-hmm. His payment paired with a job offer in the field of revenge or revengy, conflicted in the ethics of seeking the retribution of others, and the two take a walk to kind of further discuss. So Ewan's like, hey, come follow me. And we meet up with Tepa, who is at a particularly dreary wake, and Ewan displays the deep desires for revenge and how someone spends all the money they have sacrificing a restless death to seek their requests fulfilled in the life of the living. Mm-hmm. So making an offer to use his sword for their brand of justice and to consult with his late fiance if needed on this decision. So like you talk to Yugi about it if you need to. And a newly rejuvenated Raizo makes an appearance at their headquarters, like the secret office underneath the doctor's office, and he commits to becoming a revenger. And to commemorate their first, I guess, gig with Raizo, he gets these pretty sweet boots that have these like spikes on. They're like cleat boots, but way more deadly than that.
Because like his kind of go-to attack is like a lunging slash, and he can just really dig into the ground with those and get all the traction he requires and whatnot. So those are pretty sweet.
And we cut back to Tepa, who from the roof whips out the sickest compound bow I've ever seen. It's like a transformer. It goes through a multi-part sequence just to become this giant bow. And he knocks back a massive, gnarly arrow, and in the obligatory action fashion, the strength required shredding Tepa's shirt off of him.
It was like a harpoon, he pretty much, just
basically.
Massive.
And that arrow was shy of a log, and it absolutely demolishes the boat. Their hit is in, and Raizo in his flashy new boots comes in to seal the deal, and he does this like screaming like lunge slash. And the man's boss, their second target, lured into a trap by Niu and suffocated to death by the classic gold sheet. And I don't know, going back to the St. Mary tattoo, do you think Ewan's English? Doesn't he have like blue eyes?
He does have, yeah, he looks, I mean, he definitely looks very different than everyone else.
And he's paler than everyone.
So,
but even Neo's, I think she's Chinese, so they're all a little different. I think Tepa is too.
But he doesn't have he doesn't seem to have like an English name, so I don't know.
No, that was just something that crossed my mind. But still hitting its stride. I think it moves even faster on episode 2 than it did in episode 1, which is impressive.
Oh yeah. So, and here's this episode was interesting to me because I'll kind of explain as I go. But so Raizo and Miu are kind of wandering around the city, or and its surrounding areas, and so we see what looks like English ships at one of the ports. So clearly they're trading, amongst vendors, and I don't know if there's what kind of sanctions have been established with the English being there. It doesn't seem like that they have any power. It doesn't seem like they have any real power.
There's no diplomatic presence.
There you go. Perfect. There's no diplomatic presence, and but they're just mentioned so throughout. So it's like they're also
prevalent.
They're prevalent for sure. So they make a few stops around the way, Neo and Ryu, and they pass by Chinatown's pleasure district. Kind of just doesn't look like they're doing too much. They don't really doesn't look like they have really any real destination. But they eventually find themselves witnessing a shop owner being harassed by what looks like a local samurai.
Some goons, yeah.
And this one in particular, just hearing the chatter amongst the crowd who's also there surrounded, we can tell that he himself is important. He's an important presence.
Yeah.
Which we'll see him later and kind of find out more about him. And so, but this samurai is kind of harassing this shop owner who, he owns this goods, and the samurai breaks one of the goods, and there's opium hiding inside. So of course the samurai.
Yeah, it was in a Buddha, which is a classic thing actually. People will have hollowed statues.
Yeah,
stow things away.
It's pretty sweet. Throw that in there. Turns out his wife was the one that had turned him in, and unbeknownst to the man, he's just so caught off guard. He says, "My family's lived here and done well for 4 generations. I'm like, this is not me." And it seems like the townsfolk who are gathered there kind of know, he's an honest man. He probably wouldn't do that.
Yeah, even they were like, something's kind of off here.
Something's off. And of course, Ryu has a huge problem with that. And he and Neo kind of chat about that a little bit. But so essentially, it turns out where they were heading was to Ryu's, where he's going to be staying. Where he's going to be sleeping at night, because it's got to be somewhere.
Yeah, to a disdainful Shoji.
Yeah, to a very displeased Soji. They're going to be bunking up together. So obviously Soji's super annoyed, but there's just, the town is so packed. There's no open space.
That was his option. His option. Yeah.
And so we meet Mr. Isarazawa. He's the head honcho of the illustrious entertainment district.
Oh yeah. Pajama Police.
Yes, Pajama Police.
His character was cool.
I didn't really like him at first, but he grew on me. So Ewan, the Pajama Police had called a meeting with Ewan, and it's regarding the samurai who murdered the Satsuma samurai about a month back. And so I was kind of confused here a little bit. So the Satsuma, was that like?
I think that was Raizo.
But I was like, was that Matsu? Was it Matsumi, like one of Matsumino's goons, or was the Satsuma like a?
I really think it was Raizu and where he came from, because they keep talking about him, and they keep calling him the sweet potato samurai. See, this is when the fast pacing becomes like a fault to me because this info dump was so complicated. I had to watch this part several times to kind of deduct what was going on, but I believe he's talking about
The father-in-law?
Raizo, because at this point they're pinning Raizo for the opium problem. And they were like, this sweet potato samurai came in, they killed Matsumine, and now they're peddling opium all over Nagasaki, and he's a big problem.
Okay.
And this is when Ewan keeps his mouth shut because they ask him like, hey, last time we
You know
saw him,
him?
he was hiding under a bridge. And he's like, I don't know. And
Yeah.
he's like, okay, well, you know what's going on, so if you tell me no, you don't know. But
Okay,
yeah,
so that kind of makes some sense then.
this was really confusing though, because again, with how fast it goes, they probably touched on this maybe once or twice, and now they're giving us a really fleshed out description. And if you missed those like very tiny details, it's like, what the heck is happening? So definitely the first flaw of the story here, man, this was hard to follow.
It really was hard to follow. And so to piggyback off of what Austin said, the pajama place was kind of, asking Ewan if he knows anything about this, in which Ewan just acted as if he did not. And the pajama, I was calling pajama, he could tell that there was more to it that he was being told, but he just kind of brushed it off. Ewan states that he has no idea about any of that, and then pajama continues to throw Ewan a bit in gold coin, calling on revenge for that whole
Yes, go after
incident.
this guy.
Yeah, like go after this guy, take care of it. And Ewan's like, I'll make sure this gets into the right hands. So cut back to we see the doctor and Noi investigating what looks like a slums kind of area.
Yeah, because in I believe Nagasaki, they have like the town, they have Chinatown and the pleasure district, and then up in the mountains is where the slums are, I guess.
And that's a good way to put it. Like in Nagasaki, there is these different
Factions,
like you said, and it's really important to kind of know that just makes knowing the story a lot easier. So they're kind of going through this slum area, and they're clearly investigating, talking to many different people, and they come across this cave entrance, or really like just a hole on the side of the mountain, pretty much, and in it is just a mass of people who are just, you could tell, are
afflicted with opium.
Yeah, they have one foot
addiction.
in the grave. They're skinny and their faces are all sunken in, which they very much look the part of someone with an opium addiction. And here, they come across the shop owner's wife that had set him up essentially, because in doing so, Sakata, who is just one of the people who has some hold of control over Nagasaki.
Yeah, he's one of the big
opium dealers, I guess.
He is.
And he told her if she would do this, he would get her more opium,
her medicine.
And that's that's what they called it.
Yeah, they would call it like herbal medicine or something. They labeled it as something.
And so they kind of get into it more a little bit later on, but essentially these people are, they're believing that what they're taking, this opium, is just a relaxant kind of.
Yeah, they're not told this is a
hardcore drug. Yeah, and so they're intentionally getting these people addicted to it, kind of so that they can control them essentially. And so they discover her and kind of talk to her a little bit, and then Soji, Nora, and Raizo are tasked with assassinating Sakata. And Noi is more of a scout here. She kind of scouts out the area, lets them know how many are here and around. 5. And Soji hears that odd number And he's like, okay. And
I'm a gambling man.
Yeah, I'm a gambling man. And he makes a wager with Raizo. He's like, whoever kills the most men here gets the quarters all to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Raizo, in his typical monotone, he agrees. And then they both set off to this outpost. And Soji assumed that Raizo was going to go in, guns blazing and screaming. And,
yeah, last time he saw him go into battle, it was like a ah!
Mm-hmm.
So that was
It was funny that Raizo then just starts taking them out.
It was full Metal Gear Solid, like dragging bodies around and everything. Yeah.
So they're even. By the time they get into the actual post, they're even. And it's Sakata. He comes out. He sees Raizo across from him. They're face to face. Sakata is slowly inching forward, getting ready to attack, and Soji throws his
little deck of cards.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand what it was.
He throws his deck of cards and sticks Sakata right in the dome, and he falls down dead. He's happy. He believes he won the bet.
He's like, I got 3.
Before Raizo cuts down somebody behind the door. They're tied.
Yeah.
And so they're going to both be staying the same place still. And and that's kind of how that ended there. And just kind of echo what you had said earlier. The pacing is so strange because now we're introduced to this Sakata character, and I didn't even know until later that that's who that was that they had taken out.
Mm-hmm.
Because they made him seem whenever Pajama and Ewan were talking, and they said staccato, they made him sound like somebody prevalent, but he was just annihilated. Him and his whole camp was just taken out so easily that I kind of just I didn't even know for sure that was him.
Yeah, and in the grand scheme of things, he's not much more than an opium peddler.
Mm-hmm.
We're slowly making our way up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
But pacing. Episode 3 was where I was really questioning how much I liked this anime. And honestly, I think it would really shine after a rewatch.
Mm-hmm.
Because at that point, you're a little more not antiquated, but acquainted with the characters. And I don't know. First watch through may be a little rough. It's worth it though. But so Soji and Raizo are living it up as roommates. You can see Raizo's opted in for this tiny little screen to give him a glimmer of privacy. And he spent all his extra money on it. And it's so dilapidated. It was so funny. It looked like he pulled it out of the trash can. Even Shoji was like, you didn't just find something like that?
He's like, wait, you didn't find this in the garbage.
You need to... And he commits to helping him earn some extra pocket money, mostly just to get him out of the room. Because they make this joke all the time throughout the anime, but he just kind of sits there and scowls into his face.
Mm-hmm. All day.
So they head out, and then Soji, he does this throughout the story as well, but he'll pull out a card and he's like, oh, this means luck.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always thought that was kind of interesting. But Soji ends up pawning Raizo off to Teppa as an assistant in his practice. And as an incredibly painful sounding realignment is happening in the background, him being a samurai, that reputation is really preceding him. It's scaring off all his customers. So he just kind of comes out and he's like, well, I don't think this is a good fit for you, Raizo. Yeah. You should probably go find something else to do. And learning of Raizo's habitual dedication to his sword, his money-making opportunities are quickly running dry. Soji's like, what else do you know how to do? And he's like, well, I'd get up at the crack of dawn and I'd practice my sword skills, and then I'd hone my blade, and then I'd practice some more, and then I would make sure I go to sleep at dusk so I can get back up at the crack of dawn. Mm-hmm. And Soji was just panicking at this point. But The storytelling of this going through was really fun because Soji was telling it to like Ewan and Neo after the fact. So I thought that was an interesting way to approach this and how it progressed. But it was a fun thing. But resorting to either selling Ewan's housewarming bowl, which apparently Ewan is a pretty renowned craftsman because he inlays gold into pieces of usually like bowls or cups, and they fetch a good price. But being as sentimental as Raizo is, he doesn't really want to do that. So he can either do that to make his ends meet, or he can follow in Tepa and Ewan's footsteps and find a day job, find like a side hustle, whatever. So we kind of diverge from this story and make it back to the Shady Church and another info dump, but we get more insight on the revenge job ahead of them for Azumi of the Nagasaki and the pajama police's involvement in all this. But Raizu is voluntold to scope out the operation from a bookstore across the street, but unfortunately, they pick the best guy for a storefront job, Raizu.
Mm-hmm.
So he's continuing to scare off all the customers, and he even ends up catching a guy trying to steal essentially porn, like watercolor porn.
Whatever the equivalent to porn in the Edo period.
Yeah,
it was just funny. Like it was like maybe a girl showing some shoulder,
and he was so embarrassed. He's like, oh. But Soji watching over Raizo to ensure the job goes well as Raizo discovers his proficiency in painting. So he's like, you can't just sit there and scowl at people. Have you ever painted before?
Mm-hmm.
And his style of painting is very different from what is standard for that period of time. It's like hyper realistic, and it gathers a lot of attention really fast.
Which I thought was so funny. Another thing. Not that it matters, but I thought it was so funny how whenever, we see him doing that and he takes his first just brush stroke, it's literally a brush stroke across the page, like horizontally on like a diagonal horizontal kind of just stroke, and it's like the thickest line,
Yeah.
But then whenever we see the finished painting, it's like this super intricate, intricate, like it looked like it would, tiny like pencil markings to create this, and I was just like, okay, but it was just funny. It was whatever, not a big deal. I just thought it was funny because we see this massive brush light, but then the finished product is like this super detailed.
It was like a rabbit or a cat or something.
Yeah,
but they end up using Raizo as a distraction, and another sick execution scene goes off without a hitch. The Doc and Ewan each finishing both targets with their standard gold to the face and the bow. And back at the booth, Raizo gets a hefty bag for his services and commendations for his art. So we start to see new pastimes start to flourish here, which is good for him. I mean, at least he's not scowling into the oblivion anymore.
Yeah, and so here about like almost at the midway point, I was very thrown off by at this point in the story here because cut to, we just completed that mission that you had talked about, and then cut to, we don't know how much time has passed. It's just like we just see a festival of sorts kind of going on, fireworks and vendor stands everywhere. So clearly something going on. We see a banner for the Dewan company, and it looks, they kind of have like a freak show. It looks like, and so they're performing, and all the freaks are being shown off, and so the spot that Soji and Raizo stay in, it's I guess actually owned by Hannah, her parents. She's a little, she's a very young girl, and her family owns that home. And we kind of, we see Hannah outside playing with these two twins, or these pair of twins. And these twins here are kind of they got separated, Hannah, and then they were all together at this festival. It's late, people everywhere. I guess they had become separated, and there was like no adults with them. And so these twins are a little bit nervous. And Mr. Dewan, the owner of the Dewan company, he's like this creepy clown.
His eyes freak me out too.
He's super creepy. And he sees the pair of twins wandering lost and snatches them up pretty much. And so Hannah kind of runs back into town to Raizo and Soji and is crying and scared and saying, my friends and I got separated. I can't find them anywhere. And so they kind of do some investigating around town. We learn that the twins are actually from the mountainous, or the
slums, I guess.
Yeah. And so nobody really cares that they have gone missing, And Raizo and Soji even bring this up to Ewan. He's like, oh, so Mr. Dewan is notorious for snatching kids from that area. It's just definitely what he does. And we actually find out here that Noi at one point was in the care or possession of Mr. Dewan.
Ewan bought her out of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And kind of a funny scene here. Noi's like in this kite battle tournament, if you will. And Soji bet his
he bet his whole bag.
Earnings on it, expecting this huge payout. But whenever Mr. Dewan and Ewan's watching her do this, and whenever Mr. Dewan goes and asks for Noi back, Noi kind of hears him, and her guard lets down for a second. Her kite gets cut down, and Soji bet everything and lost.
He was so salty the rest of the episode too.
Yeah. And so we cut back to they kind of go to their meeting point, which is the basement of Ewan's shop, I guess.
Yeah, the underground headquarters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they go back to the underground headquarters, and Ewan's kind of warning them of Mr. Dewan, and he requests that Noi just kind of stay low for a while, and as to not attract, the attention from Mr. Dewan. And Noi actually seems like that night goes to the circus-looking tent of the Dewan company and sees the kids in the cage, and she gives them a piece of gold to bite into.
Mm-hmm.
And she then kind of goes to Mr. Dewan's tent, and they kind of have some dialogue.
Really creepy, too.
Yeah, odd. And it turns out this is not really explained anywhere else, but he mentions that she's a monster.
He calls her a demon.
Like a demon, and she can't really be tamed by, Ewan. Like he's not letting her reach her full potential, essentially. Which was odd because they don't ever really touch on that again. It just, I thought it was strange. But
the thing, I think it alludes to her bloodlust, like her desire to kill. Because later on, Ewan kind of talks about how people like Teppa and Io just couldn't fit into normal life without having something like the Revengers to get those urges out. So I think he calls her a demon because she's just a blood-hungry monster.
Yeah. Because
she actually likes killing, and the only reason she doesn't go on a killing spree is Ewan has put this foundation into her of we can't kill until we get bitten gold. That's what makes it okay.
Yeah.
And so that's the only reason she got the bitten gold, is so she'd be allowed to kill Doan.
Yeah, so it brings us back to what a nice way to segue into Noi returns to their headquarters and shows the bitten gold from the twins that were abducted. Ewan was pretty annoyed as he didn't want her to go see Mr. Dewan, but
I said, what did I ask you?
Yeah, she got the bitten gold, and now they set out to assassinate Dewan and company. And so just like all the other times we've seen, they go out at night, Now, of course, Dewan, I guess, was expecting them as he didn't fully trust Niu, and so
Rightfully so.
some of his the freaks were waiting for him, and battle ensues there. And just like every other attempt, they make very quick work of the lackeys. And Niu, at her request, wanted Dewan all to himself. There's kind of a strange scene, and he essentially allows.
Yeah, he wanted to die at her hands.
And so let's talk about this for a second, because what I was talking about earlier, it seemed like after this, I was like, it seems like almost like more episodic versus a story, like following this opium trail. So I'm like, is this episode here? It's like filler almost, because
kind of.
There was no opium discussion, which is the whole undermining aspect of the story. And so I was like, oh, is this episodic? Are we just gonna? And I don't know. And so they always make such quick work of.
This felt like a killer of the day kind of.
Like a monster of the day, killer of the day, classic like Sailor Moon, enemy of the day or monster of the week, whatever have you.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of seemed like at this point.
Because there were no ties to the opium ring. There were no ties to really anything other than maybe giving some backstory to Neo.
A small amount,
Yeah, and really it was
I didn't
just
feel any closer. I didn't feel anything like.
No, I just hated Doan's character and his weird dynamic with her. Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate his design as he was creepy and whatnot, but...
No, I will agree with you. This episode could have been... Honestly, you could skip this episode and watch the whole entire series and not lose anything. Other than, I guess, the comedy of Shoji going bust here.
Yeah. And she kills him, and that was that. That was that episode.
Cutting back to Raizo, back at the bookstore, he's receiving an opportunity for his highly unorthodox art to be commissioned into wall scrolls. This is cool. While Ewan is also peddling art of his own, and they at the same time receive their next bit in gold coin for the next gig. So a lot's kind of going on at the beginning of this episode. But we go back to Raizo and Shoji, and their walk back to headquarters leads to an attack from a group of gamblers paid to go after Raizo. So this starts to play out on the episode before the filler episode where Raizo's the target. They've made him the scapegoat. He is the reason everything's going wrong in Nagasaki. Because at first I was like, what the heck? But this scenario is clearly causing conflict within our main character. And he's like, well, I'm an artist now, but are these hands to create art or to take life? And he's like, I just don't know what the heck I need to do. Which is interesting. Raizo becomes he's a very introspective character. And we see that a lot throughout the series.
Yeah.
But Ewing returns to pajamas once again for another meeting. And his suspicions begin growing towards their hit on Sakata. And he continues to pressure Ewan further. And Pajamas explains the weight of the situation. He's like, come on, like, my boss is looking at this, and if I can't handle this, I'm gonna have to kill myself.
He also talked like it's gonna fall on you guys, you
and whoever's harboring him. Yeah, if I get to the bottom of this, we're all dying.
Yeah, exactly.
So just a heads up. But Chinatown as a whole is after Raizo on top of Pajamas in his own investigation towards him, and if Pajamas doesn't apprehend the Ronin, they're all tumbling down. So the plot unravels further here as the Nagasaki's trade union is now into the mix. And this is when things start to really get interesting. And we're starting to pull some strings together that maybe this trade union is involved in this opium epidemic unfolding in all these communities. But the sweet potato samurai, or Raizu, is explaining that random ambush from earlier. So he's being attacked now because Chinatown is aware that he's the problem. So, and I just couldn't help myself but ask, like, how? What has Raizo done besides kill people who are involved in it? But what I thought was funny is Pajamas actually asked for some of Raizo's art. And at this point, I couldn't tell if he's incredibly smart and knows Ewan's holding out, or if he's just dense and it's a coincidence. He really keeps his hand close to his chest, and I think he likes to play as the like uninformed one, just to see like how real you're going to be with him. But Teppa also hears winds of the goings-ons of the Sweet Potato Samurai and asking for help, for intel. In this room, he's kind of in a room with it looks like Chinese people. They're having tea.
You can tell they're definitely Chinamen. You can tell they're different.
I think they had gaiwans and everything. Like I was like, that's cool. But it gets incredibly tense as soon as he brings up the Satsuma Samurai, and he is asked to leave. Like, we can kill you or you can leave. And so he takes his leave. And we make it back to the headquarters. The group discusses further actions as Raizo, who's strong in his resolve to get to the bottom of this, decides to take matters into his own hands. He says, well, this is all my fault. I'm going to undo this. So Soji tries to convince him otherwise, but this falls on deaf ears as he asks why someone who killed his future father-in-law and drove his own fiancée to suicide deserves to consider my life precious. So I was like, what's the point? I'm a horrible person. May as well do something good. And realizing his actions created this whole mess, he takes his leave. And this is pretty heavy, especially hearing Raizo's take on it, and how much responsibility he puts within himself, even though he was swindled. I mean, he is taking ample responsibility, but he's taking it a little far too. But the gang just is deep on the hook as Raizo must keep the situation from imploding just to save themselves, as foreshadowed by Pajamas. So Neo takes off to follow while the rest of the group figures out how to approach the situation. And the plot's really getting pretty thick here. And Raizo walks straight into Chinatown and confronts his captors, and he's immediately incapacitated with some sweet like martial arts. He does this like key step and then like we find out later Master Liu, and this is pretty hard to watch. But Raizo's bound, he's tortured, and he's pressed for answers further. And this is kind of tough too, because Liu looks at him and he's like, these aren't the eyes of a merciless killer. So which eye do you want to keep? Because I don't want to completely rob you of these eyes. And Raizo Rio, someone creates a diversion by letting one of the boats free while the rest of the Revengers infiltrate and rescue Raizo. And Shoji, thank God, interrupts a brutal torturing scene and makes quick work of this guy, this goon. And this is when you start seeing Soji and Raizo's friendship starting to form. I like it.
Soji would never admit it, but
no, he wouldn't. Because I think he still and will be salty about having to share his apartment, even though his gambling addictions keeps him from paying rent. So he needs
someone. Having to just split all of his, his income with another person.
Yeah, it's mostly that. I can't gamble as much.
Yeah,
but Master Liu is sitting with an eccentric group, alluding to the Revengers as part of the cause of this raid, and piecing together the pajama police couldn't have made this quick of an action. So they were like, we're ruling out the cops. It's these vigilantes. And when they killed Matsumine, his massive cargo of opium ended up lost somewhere in Nagasaki. So that's how it was pinned on Raizo. So they were like, well, he killed this guy. So he knows where this opium stockade is, and this opium problem is getting bad. Raizo's fault.
Yeah, easy.
So you can see the dots connecting here. And even more interesting, this purchase was made from the chief financial officer of Satsuma. So it's starting to it's dipping into like government. And Raizo was assumed to know the location and why he has his bounty on his head. So the plot's getting thick here. Starting to make sense of this messy story.
Right.
I don't want to say messy, just fast. Fast.
Like you mentioned, we were like now introduced to the all the opium that Matsumine was sitting on, and so that kind of takes us to this episode. So we kind of start off with here a group of monks we see are being led to this temple, and very interesting ongoings here. So the monks, they, I don't know what you would call it, just due to their religion, they can't partake in
the pleasures of the flesh of a woman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Precisely. So
Loophole.
Loophole. We see some beautiful dressed up men who are in kimonos and full makeup. They come in, and then the monks are pretty excited for this loophole. Essentially, we're not cheating. We're not cheating because they're not women.
Yeah. Take that, God.
Yeah.
Buddha.
Exactly. Whatever entity you believe in, take that. So this is actually, I thought this was developed pretty well. So, so there's a new one of the monks is a new member, and the other monks say, since it's your first time, we'll let you take first bit. And so we see him now in a room, and the prostitute comes, and this monk.
He's just meditating.
Yeah, he's just meditating.
Keep your clothes on.
He's clearly different than the others, which makes sense because he's the newest member. So he's like, I'm not interested, essentially. Turns out the male kind of forces himself on this monk because he kind of tells him, they get close, like intimately close, and like I said, the prostitute kind of forces himself on the monk because he explains that the nuns who run this temple,
they're listening.
The witches, he says that they're always listening. They listen to everything. And if you don't just comply, things are going to be bad for me and probably you as well.
Yeah, you could get roped into this if you learn too much. So.
Yeah, so just comply. And so, but actually, I thought it was interesting how they actually have like this intimate conversation and learn a little bit about one another. And the monk kind of explains to this young man that there might kind of be a way out of this for him. Like he can be meant for something more than this life is in right now. And so the following day, whenever there's the prostitutes are being forced to consume this opium, you can tell he's kind of disinterested. He's
the prostitute the monk had interacted with was refusing.
And then so of course the nun comes in and forces him to take his.
There's more than one way to get your medicine.
And she forces him directly into his bloodstream via this super cool kind of
this snake thing.
Boom, injects it into him, and then so now we see the following night or the next time they meet, the monk, he's like, "Is that you?" And he's like, he can tell that he's not really being himself. And he's just totally doped up. And,
I stumbled in. Give me that dick.
And kind of exactly, pretty much essentially. And he kind of, I don't know, but they partake in this deed, and now the monk is kind of, it leaves him kind of like a broken man, and he says like I'm no longer a monk at this, because of what I've done, and
I've strayed from the righteous path.
So that was so this was interesting because we find out that the reason this is happening, or just the Matsumine's opium that he was sitting on, is now caused a what would you call it, like an over. The supply is so much.
It's an oversaturation.
Yeah. Now anybody can get it for far less.
Yeah.
And how that, of course, and all that implies, like that's going to upset some people whose main income was like the opium trade. Now that it's just the market's oversaturated, that in and of itself is going to cause some problems. And so it's just kind of more chaotic than the whole trade in general is just now kind of more chaotic, and
now it's getting a little tense. Can't
between all the factions, and
the demand's high but the supply's high, so
and all that implies. So now so we see back at the slum area in the cave, that prostitute was I guess dumped there, and again he just looks totally out of his mind, bonked on opium, and we see that the monk was there kind of treating him through it, like giving him water and maybe some food, and was kind of helping out the other people, which was nice to see that.
He cared a lot about that. That prostitute.
They shared a moment, and they're forever bonded from that. And but it was nice. It really was nice to see like him helping him out and the other people, just doing whatever little things he could to help him out. Which is probably also good for himself, as he was feeling pretty lost as well. And so I can't remember how the gold coin came about here, or who it was from.
I'm pretty sure it was from the prostitute, and the monk ended up in the possession of it.
Yeah. So that's how that comes about. So now our revengers are given a gold coin, and to pretty much eradicate the opium at this temple, and so they do it. Again, they annihilate everyone super quickly, and in classic anime fashion, the head nun was making her escape, and she's like heading out to the forest. Raizo catches up with her. Pretty cool, pretty sweet fashion how she's kind of far away, but Teppen launches his giant harpoon arrows and sticks it into a tree, and Raizo kind of like zip lines on it. Catches up with the nun, and they kind of battle for a second until they're interrupted by Master Liu. And so just like before, Master Liu's skills kind of seem to be too much. He's too fast. He's too different for Ryu, and he's losing this fight. But kind of gets saved by Soji. Who kills the nun before she can escape. And now with Teppen and Soji and Ryu all there, Master Liu decides it's probably best that he takes he retreats.
There's enough of you that I don't feel confident anymore.
But we're still at the point where it seems like Ryu believes Liu to be the source of the problem. Liu believes Ryu and company to be the source of the problem. And they're just kind of, that's where they're at right there.
A rivalry of sorts,
so Liu retreats, and now we see, and here is when I kind of started liking Pajama a lot more. So Pajama is called to the magistrate's office. He is met there by Shishido, who's the trade union's overseer. Some pretty big wigs here. And I think maybe they've touched on Shishido somewhat prior.
We've seen him as a part of the group of the eccentric people earlier, because he had like a monkey and all sorts of stuff. But we finally have a name to the face.
Yeah, and now we know that that other samurai is like the administrator for the magistrate's office. And so they're just kind of talking here. they felt like a meeting needed to be called, which, Pajama's just being roped into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were kind of talking, and then Shishiro brings up the bit in gold. He's like, he asked the administrator, have you heard of this and seen this?
Mm-hmm.
In which he replies with, it's just a rumor, And Pajama quickly tries to brush it off, like, it's a rumor. It's likely one assassin maybe did something like this, and then it's just the story spreads like a rumor. Yeah. And Shishiro kind of is like, well, we can't really, if this is the cause of Sakata's death, we can't really discount this. It's serious enough. And it's kind of seems like Shishiro knows what he's doing. You definitely get the sense that he knows more than what he's kind of leading on, and he's maybe kind of trying to put Pajama in a bind here. And so because of this, the administrator tasks Pajama with finding the killer of Sakata, which we know to be Ryu and company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because it's the exact situation that Pajama was trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And he's been talking with you, so the exact situation he's trying to avoid. He and Shishiro were kind of walking out together. Tempers flare a little bit. They kind of get in each other's faces. Really more Pajama gets in his face, and they both make some, I don't know what you call it, like some threats.
Like veiled threats.
Veiled threats. And
I thought this was funny because eventually Pajama unsheaths his knife, which is like a wooden knife.
Yeah.
It's like, I had to sell my family heirloom for my debts in the entertainment district.
Yeah. And so tempers flare there. And this is what made me kind of like Pajama, because like I more understood the character that he really was, and the part that he plays. Like he really is just kind of trying to keep the peace. Like he has his entertainment district, and he's happy there, and he's really just wants.
He's not trying to rock the boat.
Yeah, he's just he wants things to be as they are, so life for him, as he knows it, can continue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so tempers flare there. We kind of cut back to Ewan and company, and we see a painting that Ryu had just made, and it was actually of his wife. And I got pretty sad seeing that there.
Yeah, there's a. I don't think it was in this episode, but there was a quote Raizo made that was pretty sad, where he's like, "One day I hope whenever I draw Yui, she can smile for me." And I was like, ugh.
Mm-hmm. Really,
because he really depicts her so sad, rightfully so. But
and he ends up making a bunch of. It's like his collection just turns into different paintings of her. Yeah.
So, I guess coattailing off of that. The next episode, Raizo is really channeling into the trauma of driving his loved one to her demise into his art. And this impresses the bookkeeper once again, and continuing with another conflict on the ethics of drawing Yui, because, it was at my hand and my decisions that she died. How can I profit off of this and turn her into my art?
Mm-hmm.
And Ewan ends up encouraging his artistic expression as a way to work through this. Like, you should just keep doing it. You're sitting here dwelling over it constantly. You may as well channel it into something else and work your way through it that way.
Yeah.
And this is where Raizo first introduces his pseudonym Taishin for his art. And he chose that character to honor Ewan, which I thought was pretty moving.
Yeah, same.
Because Ewan really is, at this point, the reason Raizo has turned his life around.
And you can feel it's genuine.
Yeah. He turned it around. He gave him some purpose in the Revengers. And he even helped Raizo into this artistic expression he's found quite a proficiency in. So I thought it was a nice gesture, long story short. But Ewan actually brings Raizo to his old home, labeling it Taishin's Retreat, a peaceful place away from the city that he can really focus on his art and distance himself from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And Ewan even tells him, you're going to get busy to the point where you're going to need to get away from all this and keep up with the demand. And we get some further expository from Ewan's back piece and its relevance to him and why he presents it to the people he kills, as well as the necessity for the Revengers for the people like Neo and Teppa who don't fit into society. So to kind of help ease Raizo's thoughts, because he's conflicted the whole entire time over the ethics of what he does. And at this point, Ewan gives him a question of, you're doing great with your art. Why don't you just stop here? And Raizo is committed to seeing the mess he created to its end. And he's very strong in this resolve. And it turns out that this question was actually a test from Ewan to show if Raizo deserves to continue living. And to another point, Revengers can't split. Like, once you're in, you're in. And there was even Neo hanging out, like eavesdropping. And I thought that was interesting. I thought it was Ewan being like genuinely nice, but it turns out, no, it was a test. But we're taking time to reflect on the conversation with Ewan as Raizo's path crosses with an interesting priest. And we'll delve further into this character later.
I was nervous here.
I know, it was pretty tense. And this conversation was honestly really deep. And it's a conversation on the ethics of killing. And the priest goes on saying and condemning people for killing is nothing more than a whimsical joke, because the food we eat, the furniture we use, the fields our vegetables grow in, even for vegetarians and vegans, are seeped in death. And death is the price. Yeah, death is the price for all of it. And money is the force to continue life, and the dichotomy of like money and death. Like you killing someone has the same outcome as a girl who uses her money to buy flowers. I mean, death was seeped in both. And he even made a comment about how it was fitting for money being the force of the continuation of life to be called livelihood. And getting flustered at the notion that the priest was making, Raizo takes his leave. And it was pretty funny. He's like, he gets up really dramatically and everyone gets all quiet. And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm drunk. The money's on the table. And just leaves.
And that's why I was nervous, because it was very uncharacteristic for him to order like sake.
He even declined at first.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, oh no, he's going to get drunk. This priest, his presence is so commanding that I just feel like something was going to break out here. And I was like, I hope that, Raizo isn't drunk and then
makes a dumb decision.
Impaired, yeah.
But we get another info dump at the church as Ewan is tasked with another job. This time, the coin was different. It was this large, scorched coin. And but what was weird is, one, it was for Liu. Two, it had no bite marks on it. And Ewan even brought that up. He's like, hey, like, this is not bitten gold. This isn't what we do. And Gerald was even like, you can feel the vendetta seeped into this coin and into the scorch marks.
Yeah.
And apparently that coin was worth like big money.
Yeah, you could tell. Like,
it was old, valuable, lots of gold. And they make it seem that Liu is the next big opium peddler. And so
the priest makes it seem that way, right? And he even said, I think this is like maybe the first time he brings up, like, you need, like, he kind of just says, you need to finish this whole opium thing. Like, it doesn't end with this death or this death. Like, you need to see this to its end. Yeah.
Which was interesting because even the church is kind of getting wrapped up in this.
And like, I think that you could tell Ewan felt off. Like, the church, this meeting in particular felt off. And he noticed how hard they were pushing that. Yeah.
So we make it back to the headquarters, and the gang further discusses the logistics of even accepting this request. Is it a test? Should they blindly comply? They even talk about how, like, I could see the church presenting this to us just to see if we do it and punishing us for doing it because it isn't by the books. And they were like, but we can see the inverse of this. They seemed pretty insistent on us completing this. So the true depth of the revenge embodies the bite and the gold. And to fulfill the request, Neo is tasked rather to go back to Chinatown and find someone who hates Liu enough to bite the coin. Like, oh, let's just make it right, like Neo did with killing Doan.
Right.
And we can feel better about it at the very least.
And I think this kind of plants a small seed with how just logistics and how they are still being by the code, even though they were kind of tasked to overlook a bite mark by the church. They still feel they need to have that.
Yeah, let's see why, and just get some bite marks in this and show the church later, like, hey, we found a vendetta just to make it legit. But we make it back to Shishime and our priest from earlier, and it turns out that priest is a revenger as well. And the eccentric offers 5 bitten gold. He just like,
I know,
he basically like touches his teeth on it, pussy. But
which is how I would do it. That's how I would do it.
For sure. I think to bite through a gold coin, I mean, that's gotta hurt. You're probably ruining your teeth, but most people are dying.
But I love that, and because especially later on, you feel the hate in each coin. Like you feel the hatred that they have for whomever they want to, their vendetta is against with that bite mark, and that I don't know. It's kind of huge. So him, it's like symbolic. Him not biting it is,
And this kind of started me on the thought trail of, did that big gold coin come from him as well?
Because we know
because there's no bite marks in it,
and we know
he's got money.
He's rich. He has this crazy mansion, and even Pajama was talking about how wealthy he is.
And he has weird animals and all sorts of stuff. So it's just like, what?
His monkey even bites one.
Yeah, his monkey bites one, and he has all these crazy hounds.
And so, speaking of which, I thought it was odd how I don't know whose dogs those were, but how the priest kind of just threw them. There's 2 dogs, and he threw one treat or whatever it was, and it looked like they fought to the death for it. I don't know. A little bit later, you saw like one of the dogs was enjoying the treat, and the other was kind of like laying on its side.
Yeah,
I didn't see like any blood or anything, but I was like, is that dog dead?
I know. It was pretty odd. So at this point, Liu plans a trap, giving one of his goons a letter to carry in the streets. And Neo recognizes him from their last encounter, and she bumps into him and like pickpockets that note and falls right into Liu's trap. Thankfully, Raizo was watching over the ordeal and jumps in to intervene. And this scene was wild. And out of nowhere, a sniper shows up.
You like how Liu turns into Aang from Avatar and blasts
he like
Liu to the wall.
Force pumps her.
Yeah.
And then out of the blue, there's a sniper. And then they frame the sniper to be after Raizo as part of the setup. But it was actually Liu. And such good misdirection here, because it makes you think that the eccentric Shishima was setting up a hit on Raizo, but it was actually Liu. And that was pretty cool. The story is getting pretty interesting here.
Yes, and so we kind of ended there with the sniper, as you're talking about, hits Liu. I assumed he was dead right then and there. But then we later see Raizo kind of dragging him off. And he leads him to this alley. And so Liu is alive. Barely. He has 1 foot in the grave for sure. And they're, Ryu's kind of thinking how to get back to safety, how they can retreat to safety whenever we see another one of I'll call them Shishido's revengers. This redhead who kind of has like this what would you call that? Like a spiked dog collar.
I don't know. I don't know what they're called, but yeah, it's like a circular blade with spikes on it, and it's almost like a boomerang too.
Yeah, because it does come back. And so, then I thought it was interesting here that they weren't. He told Ryu to just leave, stay out of it. I'm gonna finish off the kill here.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, Soji shows up, distracts the redheaded revenger of Shishido's, and Ryu grabs Liu and kind of make their escape. And so they kind of battle it out for a little bit. I wasn't exactly sure initially why they were targeting Liu.
I was so confused when this happened because I was like, but Liu's the bad guy.
Exactly. But now on their way back to safety, Ryu and Liu kind of have some discussion, and it turns out they find out they're after the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a little bit of Liu's backstory, and that his sister was addicted to opium, and he lost her. And then we see how, I can't remember the term they had used. Also, was it Shane? Is that how you pronounce that? Where they're from?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't know, the Q sometimes is pronounced that way.
Yeah, I think it's Shing. It's either the Q or the X that makes a sh sound.
Mm-hmm. So we just kind of infoed up again. And so the equivalent of the shogunate of the Chinese.
Yeah, Li comes from a powerful family.
Mm-hmm. And that I don't know, I can't remember what they called him, but it was his task to eradicate it. He pledged his life to get rid of this opium, and Li was kind of like the first in command under.
Yeah, they gave him a vessel. They gave him a crew. They funded this excursion, so he was given everything he needed to exact his revenge.
Right, and so they're back at their headquarters. Teppen is doctoring up Liu, and the group kind of sees how there's a bunch of different things in play here.
There's a lot of cogs turning in this machine. Yeah. And they even bring up the English. So we finally go full circle with the English in there.
Turns out
they're peddling the opium from India. And the English were trading to the Chinese, and then the Chinese were bringing it to Japan. And this was actually a really interesting history point because the English really did some horrible things to China and Japan.
What else?
I'm sorry. I don't know.
And so the group kind of is putting the pieces together. And Soji, we actually see Soji's pretty conflicted with how complicated things have become.
He's like, we get the gold, we kill. That's it. I don't want to be involved.
Exactly. That's definitely, he's strong in his beliefs there.
Well, he just wants his easy money.
Yeah.
Or I say easy, but.
And so, it's just, we're getting pretty late into the show here, and everyone's left with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And the group kind of starts asking themselves, is the church involved? Because this whole, big scorched coin ordeal, like it's, they should start questioning that very much.
Yeah, like how deep does this run? Because it seems like the urgency of the request was just odd, and the church was bending the rules, and that's not how things go around here. So
Teppen and Ewan are talking, and Ewan's like, I'm gonna go to the church, and I'm gonna return this gold coin, and I'm gonna kind of tell them that Lee was actually not who we had believed him to be. And he even says, like, if I don't return, I need you to kind of take over.
Yeah, Teppen, you're next in command, so if I don't come back, it's up to you.
Yeah. And so Liu is so insistent on returning to Chinatown and letting them know that I'm alive, or just that the situation has changed. So Ryu agrees to take him there. Slowly but surely, I mean, Liu is in no shape to be traveling. He's very banged up from his bullet wound. And so they're on their way there. Little do they know, Shishido's Revengers have beat them there, and they just walk in and start attacking everybody they see. They make quick work of everyone. They even start lighting these ships on fire.
Yeah, they threw a grenade on the ship, and I was like, "What's going? Snipers and grenades? When did we start getting this technology?"
Especially the sniper seemed out of place, didn't you think?
Yeah,
the silencer. I was like,
I figured that was a stretch for this time period, and I'm sure they had grenades in some fashion, but that looked like a World War I like pipe grenade.
Yeah,
and so I was just like, all right, this is kind of taking me out of
immersion a little bit. Yeah, and so of course Liu sees the smoke from the fires in that direction of Chinatown, and he gets immediately worried. So they're like, we got to get there ASAP. Another one of Shishido's Revengers kind of shows up. One who was super, I guess, weak and then resolved in everything. I guess
did not seem like they wanted to be doing what they were doing, or even be there or be involved. And their weapons were weird.
And in fighting off, and so actually, I think that Ryu had decided he's just going to go on ahead. He's going to leave Liu here. He's going to go on ahead. And so it was just a very injured Liu to face this Revenger. Luckily, he was able to fight them off, but in the process,
reopens his
wound and kind of starts bleeding out. Luckily, Ryu had sensed something was wrong and come back. Or I guess he had actually gone to Chinatown and seen that there were no survivors.
Yeah, so he came back to let them know, basically, and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?
What's going on here?" And so that Revenger ends up running off of Shishido's, and Lee was taking his final breaths and just talking about how he crushed, how he didn't complete.
Yeah, he was like, I was trusted with all this stuff, and here I am dying. And Raizo was even like, don't let it happen. Like, it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Which kind of made me laugh.
But he presents his gold coin, and he's like, put your vendetta onto this.
And I'll see it through.
Yeah, and I'll see this through. And so he does. Now cut back to Shishido's place. He's talking back with the priest again. The priest is about to crush the head of the Revenger that had ran off, that wasn't able to kill the gravely, mortally wounded Liu. And just before he, I think, crushes his head in, Shishido comes and wants to speak to him. And as if things weren't interesting enough, we see the nun from the chapel
hanging out with the eccentrics.
Yes. Yeah. And she says that we have no affiliation with Ewan and the gang. Like they're not Revengers of our
faction,
right? And then and there, Shishido presents his bits in gold to them.
So we'll take care of them.
We'll take care of them. And so, what's going on? It's pretty wild, right?
Yeah, the rivers run deep here. That was a lot to take in, and an interesting thing I noticed is you could see the murderous intent in the nun's eyes, like they were glowing.
Yeah, she just like that, and I was just like, man, it just keeps getting crazier. So as Ryu's been blamed for everything else, he's also he's now being blamed for the killings in Chinatown, the fires, everything. And so the plot thickens. And we find out here that Shishido was actually the one
Frank Raizo.
for everything, and he actually intends to bring the opium, and he wants to incite this chaos with the opium, and he wants to flood the market. And he just for his own personal interest, I wouldn't necessarily say gain. But
Yeah,
more
this is
interest.
a textbook representation of like money talks.
Mhm.
Ethics are out the window. The money is all he sees. Yeah, he's like, this is going to be an opium den, and no one's going to stop me. And I think the money talks concept doesn't end with Shishido, but also the church as well.
Mhm.
So it shows that they don't really have any ethics either. I mean, they, like
Not
you were
really.
saying, they didn't even back up their own revengers.
So there's like not really a credo. Like it's just,
Yeah, who is the best pay? And starting off with speculation and another info dump. Yeah. Pajamas and Ewan discuss the situation further after the last episode's spectacle. In broad daylight, all eyes are on the Revengers. So unfortunately, this didn't get to happen in the evening. So blame is being placed on the gang for the opium epidemic by Shishido, who's also the general overseer of Nagasaki's trade union. So affluent, lots of power. And Pajamas is essentially letting Ewan know he's on the list of bitten gold thrown out by Shishido, and even offers him a job to watch his back. He's like, you can just stay here with me, keep yourself out of the fray. And this is when I was starting to know that their dynamic is interesting, more than just like business partners. You can tell there's a camaraderie here. And this is when I started to like Pajamas. He has this kind of like loose cannon cop aspect to him. He does like, I don't play by the rules.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get some backstory with him eventually, but the priest is hot on the Avengers trail, immediately starting with a sniper shot at their home. And Shoji left a decoy. So they quickly decided we need to get out of here. I don't want Hana and her family involved. And we got to lay low for a while. And we transitioned to Shishido mourning over the loss of a partner, I guess a business partner of some sort. It was him and a group of other traders, and Ewan was actually there, which I thought was interesting because Ewan, knowingly in the Lion's Den, accompanies this meeting, and Shishido attempts to commission Ewan in adding his golden flare to the teacup, crafted by their late acquaintance, only to be promptly declined. And it was pretty awkward, honestly. And it quickly transitions to the group admiring one of Raizu's Taishin pieces, and Shishido alluding to his knowledge of Yui's demise. And because he's like, she's obviously dead. And it makes me wonder, what does he know? He like Pajamas is really playing his hand well and feigning ignorance, but also letting little droplets of what I know dropped in there. But also an interesting parallel was made here on the suffering of an artist translating into art, and the more pain in a piece translates also into the more valuable it is. And this plays into his character quickly, but tension's broken for but a moment back at Teppa's house as the gang bides time and waits for the situation to develop. They were even complaining about how Teppa is like, how can you make a meal out of just a daikon radish? This sucks. But meanwhile, Ewan returns to the church to explain the situation. And just to veer from the explanation for a moment, the music at this point was so cool. It was like this sweet, like flamenco guitar or something like it playing. And I thought it fit the conversation really well. It was like some crazy desperado moment. But yeah, Ewan's back at the church, and this meeting comes full circle because Now we know Shishido is the source of the massive coin, and there were no bite marks on it because his lack of a vendetta and an abundance of twisted pleasure and causing the disdain of this whole situation couldn't bear teeth marks in a coin like that. That comes from like true conviction, which someone like him could not have. And the church is now obviously deeply influenced by Shishido, or just unattached altogether, the whole money talks thing, and makes claims that the truly virtuous would never succumb to the temptation of opium. And if all Japan falls victim to this vice, then the sins of the nation deserves this outcome. And I was like, man, how callous. But during the monologue, Ewan flashes the coin bitten by Liu, and even Gerald was like, wow, I can see the vendetta in that coin.
Yeah, man, this one, yeah.
And Ewan's like, yep, this is for Shishido, and I'm going for it. And he takes his leave, and he leaves that massive gold coin with him. And we're now back with Ewan and Raizo speaking of their plans, and Raizo committing to seeing this to its end, only to disembowel himself at Sosakuku at the conclusion for the shame of his actions. And we're given this branching path of, like, will he actually do this? Or he also has this segue into being an artist and leaving this behind him and working through it. So what's going to happen? And then we get another interesting scene with Shoji playing out in a gambling room. And that same nun was there dealing the dice. And she ended up using loaded dice. And Shoji just wins big, takes his leave.
Massive win.
Everyone's all pissed.
Yeah.
And riding his coattails, the nun snags his deck and tasks him with details of Raizu, because at the beginning, turns out Ewan was tasked with killing him because his father-in-law left a coin for him. And she's like, why did he break the rules? Why didn't he kill him? He actually saved him. What's going on? So,
and and you could tell that that really stuck with Soji.
Because I didn't know.
And it's kind of like he's the weakest link. And I guess in his...
Rightfully so, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so, that she planted that seed in his head, and you can tell it sticks with him.
Yeah.
And so we see that obviously Raizu is being targeted, and he's the sniper that has the sights on him, but Raizu, he's aware and he's being cautious. And so then we see Neve's like kite in the sky, and we see Teppa with the arrows on his back. It's almost like as if they're trying to pinpoint where the sniper's coming from. But just with the silencer, it's just super hard to do so, to pinpoint where all these shots are coming from, or wherever shot comes from. We see the chapel nun and the priest. What was his name? Gerald. They're kind of discussing the events to follow, the Ewan's group being defeated. And, they kind of talk about opium will be flowing through Nagasaki. The entire country will feel the effects of it. Even the English, once this happened, he mentioned like the dream of Shimabara will come to pass, and the creation of God's kingdom in
Kyushu,
which the priest would likely be ruling over. So back to Ewan and his group of revengers. I don't know if you can even call them that anymore, just with the whole church and everything kind of collapsing.
Yeah, they're almost rogue.
Yeah, and so now Soji confronts Ewan about the timeline of events concerning Raizo and exactly why Ewan chose to let him stick around. And I thought this episode was really good.
It was really good. They tied it all up really well. I was surprised.
So turns out Raizo's fiance left a vendetta of her own. A deep one. She almost bit the coin in half.
Oh yeah.
This was. I
Which
really
further
like-
makes you wonder, like, why did he pass up? Like her intent to see Raizo dead
Mhm.
was deep.
Yes, like, and I mean, you could tell, like, it just all hit
She's
her at
staring in
once.
her grave right now.
Literally, like, it all just hit her instantly. Like, so we find out that Ewan was actually the one that made one of her hairpins.
Yeah, he was connected to the family.
Mhm.
He knew her dad. He knew Yui.
And he actually, the hairpin was a gift that the father was going to give to his daughter. And of course, he was cut down, so Ewan had to be the one to do that. And Ewan was also the one that broke the news to Yui that it was Raizo who had killed her
Yeah,
father.
someone named Raizo, and she just like broke.
I thought
That was tough.
the voice acting here was so
Immaculate.
good.
Immaculate.
Dude,
Yeah.
man, it was so good. I haven't listened to the English, but
I opted for the
history would
sub,
tell us that it's not going to be nearly as good as it was here.
No, I opted for the sub this go around, and I'm happy for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was just pretty wild to learn all of that. And I was kind of confused here because it's like Yui's gold coin, I don't think anything ever came of it, right? It was just
Because he didn't fulfill it.
But man, her I really like seeing her gold coin because you could just feel the hate.
Yeah.
You know? She almost bit the thing in half. Like,
And it makes me wonder if Ewan's going to ever reveal this to Raizo, because his whole deal right now is I need to pay for my sins and be reunited with Yui, who her last moment was putting a hit on him and killing herself out of spite.
yes, and it makes me feel even worse for Raizo as his last, like, or Yui's final moments was just a deep, deep hatred for him, you know?
And his whole purpose right now has been atoning for her. So it's such an interesting duality there.
Yeah. And so obviously there's still a hit on Raizo and company, and it's still so dangerous for him to even go outside. So Soji is with Raizo this time out when he's out in the open. And they're kind of trying to see if they can pinpoint where the snipers are coming from. And there's a moment here. So after Soji learns that,
Bastard.
he lets Raizo get in front of him. And there's a moment you could tell he's literally sweating bullets. He's thinking, like, I could kill him right now.
Yeah.
Like,
He's the reason for all of this right now, and I can have a normal life again if he's just not alive anymore. Yeah.
And just before it seems like he's gonna do it, Raizo turns around and tackles Soji in an effort to avoid the sniper round that comes at him. And so, cut to Pajama and Ewan. They're doing some investigating of their own, trying to figure out the suspicious actions of one of the trade union ships that it's just been making odd trips here and to and from. And
Yeah, because that lighthouse is off limits, and it keeps going in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and they have like this whole map, and they're kind of like they're saying it doesn't make sense for it to be here, here, and here. So something's going on. And it seems like the lighthouse, that you mentioned, which is controlled by the English, I believe. They had established that initially on their arrival. And so they're kind of talking like it doesn't make sense for if the trade union should be able to go all the way out here because this is like, I guess, English territory, it seems like.
Yeah, or at least it's territory they are not allowed in. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they kind of investigate that further. Niyu sneaks onto one of the ships, confirms that that's in fact what they're doing. They're going to this island. And so, our Rangers are kind of plotting on how to navigate that whole situation. And so now take us back to Shishido and the priest. At Shishido's place, they're talking. We see him photographing a young woman who's just dead.
Opium.
Yeah.
Dead from opium. Yeah.
Literally just gone. I didn't know if she was dead or she was just like in a state of like overdose. I don't know.
Yeah, like alive.
She looks lifeless though.
Yeah.
And we see the creepy bastard has a whole wall of
He's a
photographs of
collection of
people.
macabre.
And it's wild to see. But really, we end here with super cool fashion. Our Avengers, U-Suite, or UN and company are getting ready to head to the island. But we also know that the Shishido and the priest, they're aware that they're going to this island and they're expecting them. And so we really, we can see that a big battle is gonna pop off here pretty quick.
Yeah, it's building up. And there was also a moment to touch back on that whole Shoji and Raizo interaction, but Raizo talks to Yuan later at one point. He mentions that he noticed that Soji was trying to kill him. And he was like, I don't even blame him. I'm such a terrible person. And I was like, Jesus. That was tough to hear. And you can also see after Raizo chose to save Shoji, instead of let the sniper get him, after being fully aware that he was planning to kill him.
Yeah.
I think Shoji's like, why do you have to always be like this? He was so frustrated that the friendship started to seep back in, and he's like, damn.
Yeah.
Why can't I hate you? All right, so obviously for the 12th episode, we're looking a little different than the rest of it. We jumped the gun a little bit on this. We started our watch through of Revengers 1 week early. So we had to wait a week to get to the 12th episode. So
here we are.
Yeah,
ready to talk about it.
And wasting no time, we dive right into the action on this episode. The Revengers are seeking the Revengers seeking protagonists commence their plans against Shishido. Teppa, Raizo, and Shoji are making quick work of the crew while Yuan and Ryo work from the inside. And these fight scenes in particular were really brutal, especially when Yuan jammed that.
It was, and I believe that was the first time we saw him do something different than
the goal. Yeah.
So that was cool because even the blowing the
dust.
Yeah, the dust in like their face and stuff.
It had his flair while still giving him something else to do. So I appreciated that. But and the tiger attack was kind of cool. It was a little cheesy how he got out of it, but
it was.
Tigers can swim.
Yes. So I thought, I'm glad you brought that up. That was
a little dramatized.
Just like eye roll, And I mean, all shows are different, but like you said, also it seems like Neo, she was remorseful and like saddened once the tiger died. She said once it was dead floating in the water, she was like, I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I thought that was very interesting.
That's out of her character.
So I guess she feels some type of way for animals.
At least she has some compassion somewhere.
Yeah, compassion for animals, no regard for human life, however, though. So that was interesting.
Yeah, interesting interactions all around. While Teppa and friends make their way to the tower where the real threats reside, attempting to bait out a shot for Doc to take out the sniper, but the enemies were one step ahead of them. They released a puff of smoke and baited them, and they got a shot on Doc. But this was a classic plot armor kind of scenario because he flies back and knocks an arrow back anyways. And we'll touch on that.
His trajectory was changed. The trajectory of the arrow was changed,
Yeah.
And so while while he's down, the fight, I believe at the same time this is going on, Raizo is fighting
the blade.
And another thing, it all just seems so cheesy. I'm trying not to
get too out of it from the.
But it just it was just kind of like a lot at once, and I don't know if it's because we didn't see them battle too much. Sorry, Arden. We didn't see them battle too much.
Maybe they just wanted to really make it
right because all of the battles were just so quick. They annihilated everybody. Yeah. Exactly, sneaky assassinations. Now they're battling, so maybe it's just different, and that's why that's why I feel that way. I don't know.
A little stinky from the plot armor because yeah, Teppa's like, yeah, that's the strength of the bow, and why a sniper is inferior,
right? And so how that dude throws his
like dual blade,
Soji
he hits it
with a card, and the trajectories change. And it was super cool though. I kind of dug his line. His one line, he's like idiot, only a fool cheats the same way twice.
Yeah, that was kind of cool, and it played into his character. Yeah. So Soji, he decides to hang back, keep an eye on the dock, while Raizo charges in to face the crooked priest. And an action-packed fight scene develops between Raizo and the priest. And his weapon was kind of cool. I liked how his priest's rod was a sword. I just thought that it's simple, but it's cool.
Yeah, I dig it.
But Raizo, he was clearly prepared to die from Liu, his final request. And he even stabs himself further into the blade to get a hit on the priest. He was acting so recklessly, and
he lost. Did he lose an eye?
I think he just had his eye squinted because they cut the top of his head.
Get into it. Okay.
But eventually, the priest makes it across the bridge. He cuts the bridge, which Raizo makes an unrealistically long. Yeah. His iconic jump and slash move.
I also got tired of hitting the screen because I kind of got that.
I did think it was really funny how as the priest's cleaved body was falling to the ground, he's I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yeah.
I thought that was just kind of a funny one line.
Yeah.
But so Raizo makes it into the opium den because we can clearly see the crates. So that's where it was the whole time, and UN seals the deal.
So many,
it's a tremendous amount, and I'm sure that cannonball sized thing of opium's a lot of opium. But yeah, perfectly executed. Once again, everyone died that needed to, and we quickly break away from a wild night into a normal life moving forward, going to all the original locations, or going to the original location of Raizo's, I guess, revenge. I thought it was kind of nice that they threw that gold coin back in there because they're well, we didn't accept this one. We shouldn't accept the payment, as a little nod to that. And it was almost like they're saying goodbye to Raizo, and he's really leaning into his Taishin.
Yeah, because weren't they this is where Raizo died? Yeah,
it was almost like them leaning into their own loophole, and everything comes full circle here as well. While Raizo goes to the same bridge he was hiding under at the very beginning whenever he met you in
a very scruffy
it was that little weenie with the double wood things. He just comes in and kills him with the blade that Raizo earlier plunged into him, which ironically was the blade he wanted to disembowel himself with. So it was almost a symbolically positive thing for him, because he finally gets to atone. He doesn't have to live in this reality where he killed his fiance's dad and drove his fiance to kill herself, and he didn't know that her last moment was hating him. So finally at peace, he honestly got exactly what he desired in the end, and it's a wrap.
That's right.
I think we may have different. I thought this was a lot of fun. I thought it was a very fun ride. It was a very fresh adventure action anime. My nitpicks are the pacing was a little hard.
It was hard to follow due to the pacing, in my opinion.
The info dumps were very difficult if you weren't making note of every single person, their names, and the relevance in the story. So you have to really actively watch.
Because none of the characters are introduced.
Or it's a character that's had 10 minutes in one episode, and you could definitely forget by like 5 episodes who they were. Anyways, so I think it's something that would maybe become richer with rewatches. I wouldn't mind rewatching it. I'd probably watch the dub just to see.
Yeah, I don't know if I could rewatch it. I don't know if I could. I will say I did. Overall, it was just okay to me. That's what I thought. I will say though, the story was very interesting. The setting, very interesting.
I thought the music was great too.
Yeah. So I really like the story and I like the setting. I love like Edo period Japan. I just love like there's a Chinatown station was cool. Seemed like we didn't get to see too much of the English, but just knowing that their ships were there at the port and they can
there was a lot more they could have done. I think it was a very ambitious endeavor, and I think that they did deliver. I think that they could have done more. And I appreciate that they just let it be a 12-episode experience. I'm glad that it wasn't another 100+ action anime that we have to slog through to get to the end.
And 20 episodes of filler alone.
So I appreciate it for what it is. I thought it was very well done. The animation was clearly very good. And I don't know how else it could have ended. I don't think it deserves a happily ever after.
No, the ending was good. I was satisfied with the ending.
So I would give it a regal pajama vitality.
That's solid. That's solid.
It's good. It's good. I think if I watched it a couple more times, my opinion could definitely change. But first impressions, solid. I think it made a good impression for itself.
Yeah, and it's a 12 episode thing, so I can't get too hung up on those kind of things because in that time frame, the story was so good. It really was. It was so intriguing, and so I did enjoy that aspect of it. The fights was really my main advice is like
they were cheesy.
Yeah,
and it was like this is going too well. Like where is the
we had
tension?
There was no tension. We never had to fear for our Revengers, and not a single moment did we ever have until the very end, whenever it was like almost predictable at that point.
Yeah, it really was. And keep going. I keep going back to Wonder Egg as if it's this terrible thing, but I think it's a really good reference for like when a 12-episode run does not go the way that they think it should have, because they got these 12 episodes in an OVA and it flopped. Because they were anticipating more episodes. So I appreciate that Revengers had a strong 12 episodes and they just left it there. So it gets some respect points for me for that. Let us know what you think. If you watched it, it's not Tokyo Revengers.
Not to be confused.
Yeah. But love to hear what you think. Check out our other videos. Let us know what you'd like to see in the future. And thank you for your time. I don't know. Did you have anything else you wanted?
I don't think so. I think we got it.
Until next time.